some top quality speakers again for you in the afternoon session. So first up will be Niamh McNulty. Niamh is Coffey Group Health Safety, Quality and Environmental Manager. She's a chartered professional with over 20 years experience, predominantly from the civil engineering sector. Coming originally from an insurance and accident prevention background, Niamh quickly migrated towards the health, safety, quality and environmental area as an area of speciality, using her extensive experience and knowledge in insurance in tandem with what she learned on an MSc in occupational health and safety. In her years with Coffey Group, Niamh has gained a wealth of experience working on civil, commercial, residential, operations and facilities management type projects. This past year, Niamh's been a very good friend to us in GMIT, coming in giving guest lectures to our students, which were very well received, in the area of behaviours-based health and safety. It's a topic she's very passionate about. Health and safety in construction, we heard from Pat Lucy this morning, has improved tremendously over the past 30 years, but we're still not where we should be as an industry in terms of safety. So today, Niamh will explain what behaviours-based safety approach is and tell us how it can contribute to a safer future on all our sites. Thanks, Niamh.
Good afternoon. Sometimes the graveyard shift is often seen as a punitive one, but I'm going to go with a positive approach to it, that you're all fed and watered and rested and ready for new information to come in. Just like to thank Martin and the department and GMIT for inviting me. As I've said at my guest lectures during the academic year, I always love and I appreciate the opportunity to get my health and safety clause into students at the earliest possible opportunity, to plant that seed, to know what to expect as they, I suppose, progress through their academic careers and then later in their professional careers. Not just for planting the seed for health and safety, but also for behaviour-based safety. HSQE people are EHS or HNS, and we love an old acronym, we do, you know. So when it comes to BBS, we have to be very careful that we just extended it out to behavioural-based safety, because otherwise, well, look, I don't need to spell it out here. There's kind of vicious rumours going around that us health and safety, or HSQE or EHS, whatever you want to call us, well, nice names obviously, but that, you know, as a profession, that we can't share the same airspace as engineers. And when I look around, of course, there's quite a number of you, so I'm sorry if I'm a little bit nervous. It's not speaking in front of people that makes me nervous, it's engineers. As Pat Lucy mentioned earlier on, the industry is changing, thankfully, so that myth has now been quashed, I'm hoping, so that we have a very symbiotic relationship, you know, that we can actually coexist and we don't have to operate on two parallel universes anymore, so that the health and safety and the engineering will kind of live happily ever after and be mutually beneficial. When Martin circulated a reminder email there a couple of weeks back just with the details of today's event, his timing was actually spot on, because only an hour beforehand I had received a phone call in relation to an incident that we'd had on one of our sites. And this is not the gent that was involved in the incident. For, I suppose, his own dignity, we didn't put him in there. This was a reenactment for learning purposes. But I don't know if any of you have been on site, or if any of you with, you know, some of the more seasoned heads in the room might take a guess as to what exactly he's doing here. Any takers? No? So the phone call I get is that one of our machines has tracked back over one of our operatives. Now, you know, the first statement is always the one that catches your eye, but I've learned, thankfully, down through the years that you have to settle petal and, you know, put it into context a little bit. So as it turns out, it was a track that rolled over, or partially rolled over, his steel toe boot. So again, you know, he had his PPE on, he was fine, there was no injury at all actually. He was taken for assessment, well, as a precautionary basis, but what is he doing? Okay. So it was a wet Monday morning, and a cold and wet Monday morning, as we often have, and he was moving pedestrian barriers, and as he's moving the barriers on a cold, wet Monday morning, his gloves got wet. So in an effort to dry his gloves, He stands in behind the excavator and starts warming them on the exhaust of the machine. Now, this is not 10 years ago or 15 years ago. This is literally 2 weeks ago, yeah? And when you're around for a while, you kind of think you've seen it all, you know? But again, I've learned, no, they never fail to amaze or surprise us, you know? And with all the efforts, and we put a huge amount of time and effort into progressing health and safety and being proactive and all the other buzzwords that come with it, and then we get incidents like this, and we're like, where did we go wrong with all of our systems and procedures and our documents and paperwork and certification and calibration and training and you name it? We have it all, you know, we're confident in that. How do you manage that? Do you know? Like I said, when it comes to legislation, you know, there's been significant changes down through the years, and as I believe it was Pat Lacey again, or Lucy that mentioned it this morning, that, you know, the HSA have given a nod to the construction industry in relation to, you know, I suppose the progression that they've made and the efforts that we've made in relation to positive health and safety. So it's not a lack of legislation. We have that box ticked, yeah. And I apologise for the shameless plug here, but you know, you have to, means must. So in relation to systems, we have those too. You know, we have the occupational health, OSAS 18001, and which more recently we've upgraded to 45,000. The ISO standards, we even have collaboration standards. We have all of that. So again, what went wrong? So we have the systems box checked. Our management and culture, and it was John O'Regan this morning that made the statement, you know, workplaces are changing and construction is changing. And that's 100% accurate. You know, the culture within the construction industry has changed significantly. We've seen it even in the last 5 years, let alone the last 10 or 20 years. And that can only be a good thing. You know, it has maybe a negative tradition around it, you know, of being a very tough and a very harsh industry. It's certainly not a delicate industry, but it is changing, and we're getting more in line with what is, you know, considered, I suppose, acceptable management cultures and approaches. So if we have those boxes ticked, then what's left? It's the psychology of it. I don't know about the age profile in the room. This may be a complete off the wall, but Monty Python? Yes, no? Yeah, you see? Do you see who's nodding? So once upon a time, there used to be a really funny program called Monty Python. If you're bored someday, there's a YouTube link there. But there's a particularly funny clip where, you know, he's talking to the masses, and we're all individuals and we're all different, of course, but they're all saying it in unison, which would suggest they're not. So we all think that we're all more than capable of making our own decisions, and, you know, I'm not going to be led by anybody. But in actual fact, the truth is quite the opposite. Hang on, bear with me, I'm technically challenged. How do I get this going? I know that the sales go manual. Just take a quick look and you'll see what we're talking about. So this goes back to Candid Camera, which is another even older funny program. The video is unavailable. Okay, we're not currently going to go back. Tech. Here's my. You're not having. Okay. That's all right. I can drive on. So there's a couple of references to various YouTube links there. That Candid Camera just gives an idea of herd behaviour, and it's very telling about how people react to their peers and to what goes on around them. And similarly, there's I suppose a more recent one. If you just again in YouTube and in the Drs Office Bell, and it shows about social conformity. How this lady goes into a doctor's office, and it's, you know, full of people. Of course, they're all plants from the program. And when the bell rings, they all stand up for no apparent reason. They just stand up, and then they sit down again. 3 times only it takes for her to conform and start standing up every time the bell rings, even though she has absolutely zero understanding as to why they're standing up. Yeah. So eventually they all clear out, and even new people come in, but she maintains the same behaviour. So every time the bell goes, even though all of her now, who were her peers, even though they're all now gone, she maintains that same behaviour. And new people, genuine new people, come in for their appointments, and she's standing up and down. And guess what? They all start standing up and down, and absolutely nobody in any of these has any understanding other than the plants from the program, as to why these people are standing up and down. So they're very good tells on how we behave and how your peers influence you, despite the fact that we would maybe refute that and say, as we saw earlier, that we're all individuals. So what influences our behaviour? When people are in uncertain situations, they're likely, and see how other people act before joining in, whether they agree with behaviour or not. And as I said, those two YouTube videos will attest to that. And whether we like to admit it or not, we're massively influenced by other people's behaviour. Your behaviour is learned and then reinforced through your daily actions. So if our friend at the start, or the person that he represents, does something like he did, or an action like he did in warming his hands off the exhaust of a machine, and nothing happens to him, then what message does that send, and what message does that give him? Then obviously that's okay. And he might do it every day for a year and nothing will happen to him. And every day that he does it and nothing happens to him, it just reinforces the fact that this behaviour is okay. And it's a fairly crude example, but I suppose it's an obvious one, and it's a true to life one, because as we see, this is something that he did. When he was interviewed, that was an interesting conversation. The question was kind of put to him, was like, what on earth were you thinking? He said, what? Everyone does it. Okay? So whether he believes it's a safe or unsafe activity, or an unsafe thing to do, the fact that everyone else is doing it, and their action is reinforced by them not having incidents, then everybody's at it, because nothing has happened. But of course, every time you do that with a mobile plant, you're taking a risk, and you're increasing your chances that something will happen. If he does it on a 3-ton machine, which is what that was, is he likely to do the same on a 20-ton machine, which is, as you can imagine, substantially larger and a lot less forgiving? So what influences our behaviour? Our capability. If you don't know any different, it's very hard to change your behaviour. Okay, so if you behave in a certain way and you carry out certain activities out of lack of knowledge or training or competency, as we talked about earlier, then you're hardly to blame. So if you're not capable of doing it the correct way, then you only know the one way, and that's the way we're going to continue doing it until we've either learned the hard way or been taught or shown differently. Everyone, their behaviour is based on motivation. Different things motivate different people. I'm sure at some stage in your academic careers you either have or will, certainly in the future, talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we have the physiological needs, or food and water basically, that are met, and then it all goes up to self-actualization and being validated. So what motivates you? For some people, money is the be-all and end-all, and it makes them get up in the morning. Okay? Other people, it's fame. Okay? And the two aren't always linked. Sometimes it's opportunity. What do we mean by that? And it comes down to supervision. If you behave in a certain way, be it safe or unsafe, again, if you're not shown a different, or you're not corrected that that's not okay with us to behave this way, then again, that's validated, and that's how you'll continue. So your opportunity is there if you're not shown differently. Our results influence behaviour. Okay, so if our behaviour or activities have very soon certain and positive payoffs, we tend to respond to them. So in other words, if you can, as the diagrams would depict, if you can very clearly see and understand that if I put my hand on an electric cable, it's not going to end well for me, then that's a soon and certain payoff. Whereas unfortunately in the occupational health side of things, where we have a delayed and uncertain and negative payoff, then we tend to not respond to those as much. So the likes of silicosis and asbestosis, for example, that we might be exposed to in certain environments, we don't see it. It's not like falling and breaking an arm, putting a cast, a bit of physio, and you're good to go. So it's the ones that have the long leg results or long tail results that we don't react to maybe as quickly or as noticeably. Our risk perception then will also affect and change our behaviour. And our risk perception is based on the consequences or outcome that we can anticipate. And of course, there's a host of things that influence how you will anticipate those. Your past experience. The cable that we were talking about, if you touched it in the past, if you're still living to tell the tale, then the chances are you're going to know not to do that again. Yeah, so we learn the hard way. Your confidence in carrying out a task or an activity. Okay, if you're doing it in a confident and competent manner, then the chances are you will do so more competently and successfully. When people change roles or change jobs, when you go into a new company, even something as simple as that, you're watching your P's and Q's and you're trying to get a feel for everything, aren't you? You're trying to take it all in and see what's the lay of the land. And similarly, when you, I suppose, put yourself to a new task, you have to get a feel for it before you kind of build up maybe efficiency. So you're slower to start off before you get into the run of it. So your skills, your knowledge and training, all of that will tie into, I suppose, your confidence in executing any task. Your personal factors, past experience, culture and norms. What kind of an industry or background or company did you come from? If you came from a company with maybe a lesser progressive health and safety culture, then you tend to follow on the same until you get a feel for the new culture that you've immersed yourself into. So, well, you may be able to see it okay. So this is it's in relation to perception. So Melissa Williamson, 35, a Bullet Avenue resident, worries about the effect of her unborn child from the sound of jackhammers while she stands at the garden wall smoking a cigarette. So it's, you know, perception is always interesting, isn't it? And especially depending on different age profiles. So the maybe younger, and I have to be careful with my audience, but the younger age profile, there's a much more obvious sense of indestructibility in us. You know, we think we're going to live forever. See how I say we? I put myself into that category. It's just I need to. Okay, it's a thing. But you know, people who have maybe more seasoned in the industry and they learn that we're not actually infallible, that we're quite fallible, in fact. So we maybe change our behaviour and we modify our behaviour to maybe prolong that longevity a little bit more, yeah. Our behaviour comes from our beliefs. So our beliefs are not formed around reasons, but from something within, an inner value and a feeling about doing the right thing. So a lot of it is even goes down to, you know, maybe the way that we were raised. Like, for example, my late father was a guard. So as you can imagine, you know, we came from a house that was quite, you know, regimental and black and white and by the book and straight and narrow and all the rest. And I'm sure it's not a coincidence that I ended up in a compliance role. Thanks, John. You know, but it's some of the values that are born within us, that are within us from when we're born. But our beliefs affect our attitudes to everything in life, not just to safety, but to everything in life. And your attitudes will automatically have a direct effect on your actions. Okay. And of course your actions then will affect the results or the outcomes, and then having gone full circle, as we said earlier, if those results are not obvious and immediate and negative, then it just validates the behaviour that came before it. So it's kind of a vicious cycle, but that's what we're trying to break, if you like. So how do we go about changing or improving the safety culture? We talked about compliance, so the legislation and the system, so we're kind of confident enough that we have a good handle on it. Are we perfect? No, we're not, but we certainly have a good handle on it. We talk about mindful safety, you know, there's a lot of talk about mindfulness, and you know, it has its place, and it's about being proactive and not reactive, 100%. But probably the next one is more important. When we talk about leadership, and let me see. Yeah, when Pat Lucy was speaking this morning, the thing that stuck out in his mind from an experience that I had on a project where one of the operatives had commented in relation to the safety culture within the organisation, what was the one thing that stood out to this operative was that there was no pressure. And that's instrumental in somebody's mindset and how they behave and conduct themselves. The quality of leadership is extremely important, the transformational leadership and leading by example. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, you know, the construction industry has maybe a reputation of kind of being a bit harsh, and especially with, dare I say, foremen and supervisors or people in that role where their job function has been to get the job done, you know. But thankfully the industry is embracing the concept and the caveat that, but not at whatever cost. Okay, so it's not okay to get the job done if you've seriously injured 5 people along the way. Okay, the statistics are coming down, but we don't, well, I certainly wouldn't be one for relying on statistics. I think one, as somebody said earlier as well, one incident, one accident is too many. So we're trying to change a mindset. In one of the other speakers actually, and it wasn't in relation to safety he was talking, it was actually in relation to the modular construction, which was fascinating, actually, it was quite interesting. But he said even in that capacity, it's a different approach and it's a different mindset and it's a different culture to accept and embrace the concept of modular construction. And that's the very same terminology that we use when we talk about behaviour-based safety, that it's a change in our approach and it's a change in our mindset and it's a change in our culture as an industry. So that's what we need to do if we want to get people on board. We can't change safety behaviour by kind of a militant approach. We have to use, I suppose, the new buzzwords within the industry would be very much along collaboration, communication, okay, empowerment, engagement, bringing people on board. You know, instead of talking at people, it's talking with people and talking to them and getting their buy-in. It's so fundamental in affecting change. If any of you have young kids or brothers and sisters or anything like that, or you see, you know, I suppose active parenting, and you see people with young children, it's going to be more successful if it's their idea. You know, you give them a choice and you manipulate that choice to get the answer that you want. But once it's their idea, they're all about it. Do you want to go to the park or do you want to go here? And the park has this, that and the other. So you're putting the emphasis on one part, but ultimately it's their idea. Let's go to the park. That sounds fantastic. So they're all about it and there's no challenges. So that's very fundamental in us. The praise and integrity as well. I suppose in the Irish psyche, we're not fantastic at that, are we? You know, we have a unfortunate, maybe, history of kind of being a nation of knockers. You know, we love to see the negative in things, but even that's changing. We're much more positive, and even the whole mindfulness thing, we're more open to change. So we have to embrace that and work with that. And as I said, in relation to the collaboration, we work with I suppose, one of our largest and most reputable clients are all about collaboration and working with the client. So we're very much on board with that. So behaviour-based safety should be done with the workforce and not at the workforce. And that just, I suppose, continues on the engagement side of things and getting people on board with you. So what if, and I know it sounds cookie, but what if we communicated with employees? And that's what we try to do. This is a quote from Heinrich, who was an industrial psychologist, and you'll note, again, it goes back to the 1950s. This is not a kind of a new age concept or a new age theory that we're working on. So the supervisor or foreman is the key man in industrial prevention. His application of the art of supervision to the control of worker performance is the factor of greatest influence in successful accident prevention. And there's so many powerful words in that. Even the art of supervision, and anybody who has ever worked in a supervisory capacity would probably appreciate that, you know, because people management and supervision is probably one of the most challenging aspects of a supervisor or management role. And to try and get people on board to get the outcome that you want can be difficult, because obviously you're dealing with human beings and your human factor, human input and personalities. And it's the application of that art of supervision, the greatest factor of greatest influence in successful accident prevention. And again, I've shared that with our own foremen and supervisors a lot, because we want them first to understand that we appreciate the challenges that they have as supervisors. We also want them to understand the impact and the influence that they have and can have on people, be it for the positive or be it for the negative. Yeah? They're also kind of an easy target, you know, when we talk about it in relation to occupational health. We talk about bullying, which, you know, anyone will tell you is a horrendous thing to have to deal with. And for a victim, it's detrimental, it's so damaging, it's incredible. But it's also a term that's bantered around the place very, very easily and very lightly. So, you know, bona fide and genuine bullying, if you like, is something that needs to be treated very, very seriously. What happens when you're in a supervisory capacity? You know, not everybody likes to be managed and not everybody likes to be led. So it's important that they do so with that in mind, that they don't become an easy target and that they conduct themselves and manage themselves, I suppose, bearing in mind the culture of the organisation. That's pretty much all I have. If there's any questions or comments.
Questions
at the end, that's perfect. Okay, thank you.